Hello there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle, and you are joining another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Wednesday Whimsy is a short show that I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game topic, a top 10, or something else that happens to be on my mind. So I'm often asked, when I say I'm into board games, that I have a lot, that I play a lot, people ask, well, what's your favorite? Now, usually they only want number one. No one is really ever concerned about numbers 100 through 2, but every other year, so odd-numbered years, I historically have gone through and made a list of my current top 100 board games. So I'm going to be using this Wednesday Whimsy over the next few weeks as an opportunity to discuss them briefly. With 100 board games, we don't want this to be, several hours of show. They're all great games that I could talk about for a long time. How did I set the ranking? Well, so like many people, I use the PubMeeple system where you put in sort of your inputs, and my input was games that I had rated 8 and above. And then it sort of pulls those in and it puts up 2 of them, and you click which one you prefer. And so it will then generate a list through some sort of mathematics that you can then use, and that's sort of your ranked list. Now, I took that list and then I went through and I made some changes, right? There's some things that just ended up not being right because, I don't know, it ranks a small card game against, a great big Euro game, and those two might not really be comparable. So, it's the PubMeeple kind of with an asterisk by it. But that's how I got here. Anyway, I'm going to talk about 20 games each episode, and I believe the final 20, the final part 5 of 5, we're going to do on one of the weekend shows with Ilya, so he can comment about my choices. All right. With that, I'm not going to show a lot. I mean, I will try and find them on Board Game Geek and add them in, but yeah, I don't have the numbers for these just because I think we only have 1 to 100, or sorry, 1 to 10. But let's get going with my number 100. My number 100 is a game that no one really remembers, unfortunately. This is a game called City of Remnants. It was the third game from Plaid Hat Games, and it is it's just a delightful, interesting game. It's a bit of deck building, a bit of area control, and you had these 4 different factions that played differently. And look, the artwork's not great. The rulebook's terrible. It's out of print. It did come back as a game called Neon Gods, but it wasn't very successful. I mean, there's a lot of issues, like the print on the stuff's too small to see. It takes up too much space, but it's just a lot of fun. You get in there, you have these interesting combat systems, an interesting way of doing your deck building, and I found it to be such an interesting and engaging game. It's been on my top 100 for quite a while. Still is City of Remnants. Let's go on now to number 99. Number 99 is another game that's been out for quite a while. This is sort of the big game from Bezier Games, and this game is Suburbia. Suburbia is the original version was quite ugly. The version I prefer is the collector's edition, which has way too many player colors. It's like 25 player colors. But this is a city building game. You have you'll have these city tiles that you're putting out, and each one of them will react to other things in your city and other people's cities. You're trying to get the most population, but as your population goes up, eventually you'll cross thresholds, which will push your income back down. And you're trying to sort of balance those things because you definitely need money as well as population. The new edition looks much better, but I really love the way that all of the different things interact with each other. I found it to be a fascinating game, and that's why it's my number 99. Suburbia. Let's go on to number 98, which is Alter Quest. Alter Quest is one that I talked about when I did my top 10 dungeon crawl games. This is a game that's kind of a nod to HeroScape. Is it HeroScape? No, HeroQuest. Sorry, HeroQuest, where you have this character. You're going through a dungeon. You're going through, knocking stuff down, fighting monsters, trying to find certain objectives. There's a bunch of different quests you can play, a bunch of different characters you can be, and a bunch of different monsters you can fight. You're essentially going to take a couple of different things, a monster, a quest, a couple of heroes. You kind of mix those up, and and you get your game. It's an enjoyable, very light and easy to get into, although a terrible rule book, but a fascinating game. My number 98, Alter Quest. My number 97 is also a sort of explory questy game, not a dungeon crawl per se, although arguably some parts are. And this game is Hexplorit. There's 4 versions currently. I'm just going to say they're all kind of the same game. I'll put it down as Valley of the Dead King because that was the first one, although I think actually the second one is the best, the Forest of Brumilon. But in this game, it's basically an RPG style game. Well, it doesn't, yeah, forget that. An RPG style game where you're going through and having these adventures. That's more what it looks like. And you have this whiteboard that you're going to be writing, dry erase board. You're going to write things down, erase them. That's how you keep track of your stats. The game will sort of be the dungeon master for you. And you've got so many different characters with different ways that they can be upgraded. Just so many possibilities. Once you add in a couple of the new, they're all standalone. So the 4 different versions, the Valley of the Dead King, the Forest of Adremion, the Sands of somebody or other, and a castle with vampires. You've just got so much variety. You could really play this game forever. It's great to play solo. It's great to play with 2. It's a little bit on the long side, and some of the rules, especially the combat, can be a little bit of a chore to learn and internalize, but I find it to be just a fascinating D&D style game, role-playing game, Hexplorit. Kind of a corny name. Number 96 is another adventure game, but very much a different one. This is Forgotten Waters. So Forgotten Waters, I remember it came out right at the beginning of various pandemic shutdowns, and I was so disappointed because I wanted to play it, and I didn't have anyone to play it with. But fortunately, it is playable solo. They came out with a great solo version you could play, which let me get into the game. It was sort of the first new game from Plaid Hat after they got their independence back. In this game, it's more of an experience than a game. You're going to go through, you're going to have an adventure. You use an app which will tell you to go to certain pages. You'll go there, you'll put your people out without thinking about it much. It's kind of, there's a time limit on that. And then you'll do different things. And you're trying to get different goals, trying to have different adventures. And there's this app, like I mentioned, that will remember what you've chosen and sort of use that to tell your story. You can play the same quest multiple times and have different experiences. The writing is great. It's very funny and enjoyable. It's a humorous pirate style of game. And I just really have a great time with it. It's good voice acting, too. There's a lot of different quests. There's also an unlockable download or expansion that's just more quests. Really a very fun game, solo or with any number of players. Not necessarily cooperative, but mostly cooperative. It's kind of like cooperative, but you have your own goal. So semi-co-op, with the semi being in very small letters. A newer version of it came out called Wayfarers or something. The name's eluding me. I haven't played it yet. It's the new, also from Plaid Hat Games. I'm looking forward to trying it, though. It's a non-pirate. It's more of a role-playing game type theme. But Forgotten Waters is the one I've played, so that's the one that's on my list. 96, Forgotten Waters, great game. My next one is 95, The Hunger. So The Hunger it's kind of like Clank. I think I might have talked about it on a Wednesday Whimsy at one point. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. If I didn't, I should. It's a good Halloween-y themed game. You're a vampire. You're coming out at night, and you're trying to feed. And so your goal is to go out along this windy path and kill people to get as many points, but then make it all the way back before the sun comes up. If you don't, you just lose. So be careful with that. It's a deck building game, right? The cards that you're buying are going to go into your deck, but you don't draw very many cards. I think, if I remember correctly, it's like a hand of 3. So you're going to make it through your deck slowly, and all the cards that give you points tend to be terrible and will just kind of slow you down. So you really have this interesting balance. If you can make it all the way to the end, there's a super bonus card in this Rose that gives you all kinds of points and also some special abilities. There's different scoring tiles you'll come to. A lot of fun. There's a great expansion for it, too. I really enjoy The Hunger. That's my 95. Let's go on to number 4. 94, excuse me. 94 is Ankh, Gods of Egypt. Ankh Gods of Egypt is the first one we'll talk about in a trilogy of games by Eric Lang from Simon. And in this game, you're representing some big Egyptian god. You've got these huge minis, and you're trying to compete for the most points. There's this interesting action selection mechanism where you're going to select an action, and then it's going to move over. And when one of these action trackers gets, so you select two actions, but as long as you select one at the top and then one below it. But if one makes it all the way to the end, that's going to trigger kind of like a scoring type round where you're going to resolve conflicts and you need to be ready. So it's going to kind of inform what you want to do based upon when you want that to trigger. It's a really interesting mechanism of timing. There's some odd rules in a game with more than two players, where two players who are in last place are going to like merge together and become a super player. That can be a controversial rule. But I enjoy it. I think it's fun enough as long as the two players are able to, both play. Sometimes that can lead to one person essentially governing everything that goes on in the game at that point. That's not fun for the other player. But it's a really interesting game. It looks great. Lots of different characters and special abilities. I have a great time with it. 94 Ankh Gods of Egypt. Ankh. Next we have 93. My number 93 is a game called Unsettled. Now, Unsettled is a game that I enjoy more when I'm playing it than 93, but I also never want to play it because it's kind of a chore to get out, relearn the rules and things like that. But what it is it's this, I can't find any good pictures of it, but what you have is you're this team of scientists that are stranded on a planet, and you essentially have a whole bunch of different planets, and you're going to pick one, and that gives you sort of the special rules, the missions, etc. And each one, I think, has two different stories you can go through, and you're trying to find a solution to accomplish some goals. You don't necessarily know what those are, but you're going to go through, explore the planet. You don't usually do a lot of combat. You're just trying to get whatever it is, wherever it is, and you use these dice to select actions, and as they go up, eventually they're going to run out of steam, and it's going to fatigue you and push things push the sort of bad things aspect of the game. You also have this cute robot that's helping you out. The stories are great. The writing is fantastic. The rules are pretty simple, although it's kind of like a framework of rules, and each of the different boxes, each of the different planets is going to have its own set of rules. So that's why it can be a little bit of a chore to get out. I also will say, while it's great, it's good solo, it's great at 2. At 3, it tends to cease to be as good. It's hard to sort of balance 3 players in this game. So 2 players is the best player count for Unsettled. There's a new expansion coming for it with even more planets. I'm excited to see it. I've really enjoyed Unsettled. It is my 93. Let's go on to 92. My number 92 is another dungeon crawler type game, but it is a very different dungeon crawler. This game is called Vagrant Song. Vagrant Song, you find yourself on a train. You're some kind of a hobo, and you're going through, and this train is populated by all manner of ghosts, and you're trying to complete certain goals, but that often involves reminding the ghosts of their humanity, usually by punching them, or other ways. And so you're trying to go through these actions, and you're drawing these chits out of a bag, and those are going to inform the different actions that you can do. You've got a whole bunch of different characters, and then it's like a 20-game campaign. So the campaign is both something I love and something I hate. I enjoy the story. I had a fantastic time. I binged my way through all 20 scenarios of the campaign. And some of them, the first scenario I've played enough times that I'm not as interested in it anymore. But some of the later scenarios are just fascinating with what they do and how they do it. The problem is that the only way you can really get to the scenarios is by playing through the campaign. And it's just not really the kind of game you can jump into the middle of. Now, you could say, well, Kyle, I could just open it and play. Yeah, but you wouldn't have the progression, so you would be underpowered for that scenario. Or if you just pulled out some random items, you'd be vastly overpowered for the scenario. There's an expansion that's on Kickstarter right now with the Off the Rails expansion, which I'm hoping is the ability to sort of play one-off scenarios which if this game had one-off scenarios, it would be much higher on the list. As it is now, I really enjoy it. I had a great time with it. I think the world and the mechanisms are just so interesting and exciting. I just wish it weren't a campaign. 92, A Vagrant Song. My number 91 is a game that I'm sure I've done a Wednesday Whimsy of about. That is Crusaders, Thy Will Be Done. Terrible name for a game that kind of disappeared for a while. I had it from Tasty Minstrel, but it's recently kind of resurfaced. This is a game all about rondels, and you're going to be building your own custom rondel. You've got this kind of Mancala mechanism too. You're going to pick up all the you're going to do an action, pick up all the tokens from the action. That's the strength of the action, and then you're going to distribute them around your board, dropping one off on each space. And so by doing that, you're going to make other actions stronger. You can also upgrade them, though, so that you can do more actions from them, so you get greater bonuses. And ultimately, you're sending a knight out trying to Christianize Europe and ultimately the Middle East, which, okay, whatever. But what you're really doing is trying to get points in a variety of different ways. There's technologies to upgrade. There's these buildings to build. There's your own special ability. There's bad guys to vanquish. Lots of different things to do and try. It's just such a fascinating game. The rules are super easy once you get into it, and the expansion is fantastic. It's my 91, Crusaders, Thy Will Be Done. Next, we have an older game that was recently or semi-recently remade, and that game is Rococo. I'll show the deluxe edition, which I actually think is kind of ugly, but and definitely overproduced. But what you're doing in this game is you're making dresses. You're making or outfits, I guess. So you're collecting materials and using your personnel to produce these outfits, to sell to noblemen, to wear to the ball, to have your things on display and get as many points as possible. Very much a Euro game, but a more thematic one than you would expect. It's got an interesting sort of means of doing deck building, interesting means of kind of getting your different bonuses, some area control, a lot of things to like here. And it's if you can really get in and kind of go all in on that theme, it can be a lot of fun about making these dresses. I have a great time with Rococo. I think the solo version in this new version of it is really good, and the expansion is also really good. It's a big and expensive game. It's both too big and too expensive for what it is, but it's kind of worth it. Anyway, my number 90, Rococo. My number 89 is a newer game, The Witcher Old World. So this is one that Ilya and my brother both talked about. I'm not really familiar with the IP, the TV show, or the books, or the video game about The Witcher, so I was not all that intrigued by it, but I heard from people that I know that it's good, and it really is. So this is very much kind of an interesting take on a deck building game. What you do is you're trying to go around, you're trying to accomplish certain feats. As soon as you've gotten 5 points in a variety of different ways, you win the game. So you can do that by upping your stats to a certain level, or by winning a combat either against another player or against a monster. When you win a combat, you get a special ability. When you up a feat all the way, you make it better too. So that's also good. And the interesting thing about it, though, kind of where it lives and dies, is on its combat system. And what you have is these not those cards. These cards, and you're going to be chaining them together. Now, of course, the ones that are showing up here don't show that. But like this yellow card has a purple marker, so that means a purple card can be played on top of it. And you're making these different combinations once you get into a combat to try and do as much damage as possible to the other player, which could be either another player or a fictional or a monster. There's a couple of expansions. The Legendary Monsters expansion is the best one because it makes it really a soloable game. The solo mode in the kind of base game is just to beat your highs. See how many rounds it takes to do this, which is, well, doesn't even come with a way of marking the rounds. So, that's out the window. There was also a solo mode called the Wild Hunt, which was also kind of wonky. But this Legendary Hunt with the Legendary Monsters makes it a game that you can play solo. Really quite interesting. You're just trying to beat that monster as quickly as possible. But as a 2-player game, it's also really good. I've not played it with more than 2. I'm not sure I'd like to because it's quite long as it is, but it's a really interesting game and it makes me want to learn more about the world. 89, The Witcher. Next, we have a huge game, and this game is has all the problems a game can have. It's expensive. It's hard to find. The publisher is horrible. Um, but it's so much fun. What you have are these various eldritch gods, and yeah, you can see there sort of the size of all the stuff. But you're going around on this map, you're using your power to do actions, and you're trying to complete certain number of spell books so that you can then perform things to get points and win the game. You have to complete all your spell books, though. You're trying to awaken a great elder god. You're trying to fight and defeat other players. There's a lot there. There's a whole bunch of different factions that I'm not sure are really balanced, but that's okay. I will say the publisher has some serious issues. Really probably shouldn't be publishing, needs to sell this off to someone else. But if you have the game, it's just a lot of fun. I will say smaller player counts are better because it's one of those things where more people just kind of add time without adding a whole lot of value. 3 is probably best, but then you have to make sure you watch each other so that everyone's keeping each other in check. But it's really a good game despite some of its baggage. Number 88, Cthulhu Wars. It's also an iteration. If you're familiar with Blood Rage or Chaos in the Old World, both of which I like a little bit better, this definitely is heavily inspired by those. Next up, we have my number 87, Vindication. So I already talked about Unsettled. Unsettled was, Vindic. Vindication. Unsettled is sort of one game by this company, but Vindication is really the game that made them well known. And what you're doing in Vindication is you are going around on this map, you move on the diagonals or on the corners between these spots, and you're going to move around, you're going to up some stats or use a character to get some resources, and you're going to activate the buildings that you're next to. And ultimately, your goal is to have as many points as possible. As you gain points, though, you're going to go around this board, and you're going to hit these triggers, these coins that are on the corners of the board. And when you hit a trigger, you're going to add another end game trigger to the game. So you don't know when the game's quite going to end because those different end game triggers are going to come up at different points. And that's kind of where the game's hook is. The solo modes for the game are mediocre, but as a 2-player game, or even with 3, it's pretty good. There's just a lot that you can explore and try and do. Definitely not for everyone, and definitely a big game in terms of size, but a really fun one that I really enjoy and I was enamored with since the first time I played it. My number 87, Vindication. So going down to the other end of the scale, my number 86 is a small game. This game is Drop It, and Drop It is just a delightfully fun, silly game that you cannot overthink. You have this contraption. On your turn, you're going to drop a wooden piece into the contraption. It's going to land somewhere, and you're going to score points or not. Ultimately, you need to make sure that where it lands won't touch anything that's the same color or shape. And if you do, you're going to get points based upon how high up the thing is and whether it hits some of these little trigger points in the contraption. If you touch something you're not supposed to, then you don't get any points. It's really all it is. It's fast. I mean, you really know all the rules you need to play right now. You set it up. People often stop by and see it. I do wish the scoreboard were a little bit bigger. It goes to 25, which is not the easiest to kind of calculate your score with. But the game itself is, it's one that you just play and play and play, and anyone can play it. Very light, very simple, very, very fun. 86 is Drop It. My number 85 is a huge game. And in this one, I'm only putting one version of the game on this list. There's 3 versions of the game. There's Terraforming Mars, there's Terraforming Mars, the dice game, and there's Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition. But I'm going to go with kind of the original, the big, heavy one. This is Terraforming Mars. You are on your turn doing one of a variety of actions. Mostly you're trying to play cards to build up your income so that you can play better cards and build up your income more. Ultimately, your income is also your score for at least to some extent. And so you're trying to terraform Mars by increasing the oxygen, increasing the temperature, and placing water on the planet. And every time you do so, it also increases your score and your income. So that's sort of the incentive to do it. There's so many cards in this game. Each one is different. And there's a bunch of different corporations with special abilities. There's several different maps. There was a Kickstarter recently with even more. It's a huge game that doesn't fit anywhere. It's too big and it takes too long, but it's a lot of fun. And especially at two, it just moves along so smoothly. The Ares Expedition is faster, and that's arguably better. And then there's the dice version, which I like, but it seems like no one else does. But I really enjoy Terraforming Mars. It used to be much higher on my list, but because of the size of it and the length, it's fallen down a bit. But there you have it. That's my number 85. All right, just a few more. We're going to go on now to my number 84, which is a game Ilya talks about a lot. This game is First Class All Aboard the Orient Express. Terrible title. But what you're doing in this game is trying to get points. So you have you have this board, and on it there are two sides. There's one side that's a bunch of train cars, and there's another side that is a train track. And as every turn, you're going to take a card from a center display. After a certain number are taken, I think it's just 3 per round. After a certain number of cards are taken, you're going to score. You're going to move your train along and do all of the bonuses it gives you, and then you'll score your train cars based upon their value and how far this conductor has gone. So there's a lot of different ways to get points. You're going to have scores in the 200 to 300 range, which makes me wonder why they have a scoreboard that only goes up to 50. But it's definitely a free form game because you've got all these different modules. I think there are 8 total, and you're going to use 2 every time you play. So it'll be a little bit of variety. An easy game rules wise, but there's a lot to think about. And so it can be a little daunting for new players. It also takes up a ton of space, but it's a great game. My number 84, First Class All Aboard the Orient Express. My next game is another game that I actually was not interested in until I heard it talked about by Ilya so much, and this game is Last Aurora. So Last Aurora, it's a post-apocalyptic world, and you are racing along trying to get to this airship before it leaves. Forget that, you're never going to make it. You're trying to have the most points. But regardless of whether you make it there or not, it's this interesting game where you're building up this caravan, and you're going to use this caravan to, you've got these characters as well, and the characters, you're going to play them to do different actions, and then they'll be tired for a round unless you're able to refresh them sooner. And you've got this caravan that's going to hold your supplies and have your weapons, and you're going to need the weapons to fight off raiders that come in, which will get you points if you beat them, and get you bonuses as well. And you're mostly trying to get along this track, get as far as possible, hopefully make it to this airship before it leaves. A couple of expansions with, small expansions. One is another player board, and another one is some different cards and characters that you can use. But really interesting game. One that's kind of a hard one to retain in your brain, but a great one nonetheless. My number 83, Last Aurora. Next up, we have a new game on my list. And this is one that, if you had asked me right after I played it, I might have given you different ideas. But as I've come back to it and thought about it more, I've really come to enjoy this game, and that is Marrakesh by Stefan Feld. This game is huge. It's way too much. I mean, this is set up for 4 people, but you can see it's sort of the whole length of the table. This game has these tokens that you're dropping into a cube tower, essentially. You'll use those to select your actions, to improve your actions, and ultimately you're trying to get the most points. I've talked about it on my top 10 Stefan Feld games as well, so you can go and think about that. But it's a game that kind of feels like Stefan Feld took all of the years of game design that he had and put them into this. And yes, it's huge, and yes, it's ridiculously expensive, but it's a lot of fun, and it's one of those games that just won't leave me. every time after I put it away, I start thinking, I really want to try that again because there's so many different options in it. Very much point salad, but hey, that's sometimes the only salad that I can eat. The next one and the last one for today, these are long videos. I apologize for that. This one is Council of Four. And I normally don't care about the version of it, but I definitely mean the older version, and I can't seem to find a picture. This is the version I have. It's Council of Four. And what you're doing in Council of Four, this is a game that has no theme to it, but you've got these cities, and each of them is going to have this council, which is this little balcony of a certain number of people, and you can essentially throw them out the window. You're going to take new people, put them on the council, and push somebody off. And the reason that matters is the different colors are going to dictate the cost to do certain actions. So you have to play cards that match the different colors of the people. So ultimately, that's what you're doing. That's kind of the game's gimmick, is you're going to be pushing people out of the window, the defenestration game, and you're trying to move around. But ultimately what you're going to do is put your little cities in, or your little houses in these cities. And when you do so, the first time you get the bonus, and then the next time you get the bonus for that city and the city that it's connected to. And so by building this long chain of connected cities, you're going to get all kinds of interesting bonuses. And so your turns start out really fast, and toward the end, you just get so many things each turn. It just feels like you're getting something every time you do something. And that's always a nice feeling. Ultimately, you're trying to, get groupings of have in one area all of the something in all the cities, or have them in all the cities of certain colors, right? You're sort of normal Euro game things, and it's very much a themeless Euro game. It could definitely have gone on the Mummies list, and it definitely was on the short list. But it's a good game nonetheless. It's one that I really enjoy and that I'm always looking forward to, and it doesn't really feel quite like anything else. Anyway, that's it. That is the first one of 4 done. I'm going to be back again next Wednesday to talk about my number 81 through 61, which will be the second fifth of my top 100 games. These are all great games. I encourage you to go out and look at them. I mean, obviously try before you buy, but also come back next week to see some more games that I enjoy. And until then, I'm going to wish you safe journeys and courage when you need it. And I will see you back hopefully next week on another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. All right. Bye-bye.